So, welcome Matt Thibault, CEO of Savant Marketing Agency. Matt, just want to hear about, your faith journey and your business journey. I know they're kind of intertwined, but let's start more at the beginning. Tell me about, your upbringing and your family and
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I grew up in like a really typical like Catholic family. Like every night I just remember like my dad always like doing the rosary with us, blessing us before bed. I remember like the hustle and bustle, Sunday morning to go to church and just yeah, and like and do all these things, that are good Catholic things. I remember like my, confirmation and communion and all those things. So I grew up like in I would say a pretty Catholic household, and I didn't really understand a lot of it at the time growing up. And I remember, talking to some friends at school and realizing like, oh, like you don't pray before dinner, or like, oh, like so
and that was a Catholic school.
and that was a Catholic school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And I remember like kind of, realizing that pretty young, like, wow, like not everybody, this isn't normal for everybody. So that was kind of like what my childhood was like, especially my dad. He was very devout, and so he was always praying over us, and I didn't really understand it when I was young. I think a lot of people don't.
Now, in that though, would you have, even though you didn't quite get everything, would you had a sense of God's presence as a child? Would you have sensed His presence, or would that have been, it was more kind of the family culture than actual
It
the
was
presence of God?
Yeah, it was more the family culture. I always knew that God existed, a God. I wasn't sold that it was Jesus, but I thought to myself, well, this seems like a good thing. I believe in God. I'm gonna go along with this.
Yeah. And what did you like as you kind of got older, and it maybe into your teen years or beyond that, when it was kind of time for you to sort of decide for yourself your level of engagement?
Yeah, I remember right around I was like 10, 11 years old, I started really getting interested in cycling. And, my dad was a big cyclist. And so I started to like really build that as a passion. And I remember one Sunday I got sick and I like wasn't able to go to church or something that Sunday morning. And so everybody went to church and I was just like at home. And it just kind of clicked and realized for me, I was like, it's kind of nice having my Sunday mornings. It's
Yeah.
kind of nice to just like not go to church. And then like I just kind of started to realize like, do I actually believe this? It was right around like 10, 11. I was like starting to listen when I went to mass, and I would listen to like what the priest would say, and I started questioning to like, do I actually believe this though, or is this just what my parents want for me? And so I would say like right around like 10 to 12 was when I started like questioning it, but still going along with it, still
Hmm.
going to church and doing all those things. And I grew up in like, youth groups and stuff. Like I was doing all this stuff, but I wasn't really activated. And then I remember it was right around 16 years old where I told my mom and I said like, I don't want to go to church anymore. Like I don't feel like this is really for me. I don't really understand it, what's going on. I believe in God. I don't really know if this is it. So that was kind of where I started stepping back. And I feel like for my whole life, I've always kind of been the person that I've always like questioned things and been like, but is this actually true? I've always kind of sought like truth. I'd like to think that I do. And so I started just really thinking to myself, like, do I actually believe this? I don't think so. So I'm going to take a break from this. And my parents were upset for sure, but they respected that and
Yeah.
they were like, you know what? That's fine.
Now it was also like in that time where you also, you saw the early signs of a businessman.
Hmm.
Like it seemed like, from what you've told me in the past, there was like there was kind of a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit even as a boy.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember kind of my first big like entrepreneurial venture was in high school. I noticed that a lot of kids would have things called Zippos,
Oh
which
yeah.
were like these little lighters. And I went to like a pretty, I guess like a pretty ghetto high school. Shout out St. Pat's. And I just realized that a lot of these like popular kids and just people of like, who had status in the school would have these Zippo lighters, and they would have like cool designs on them and stuff. They're kind of like a lighter with a wick, that you can flip and do
I
tricks.
remember them from back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I started seeing that, and like my mind just started thinking like, wow, there's a lot of people who want this Zippo lighter. How much does it cost? And I like looked online, and there was like a store around that sold them, and I looked, and they're like $60 to $80 for like some nice ones, even more for some of them. I was like, there's definitely a way to get this for cheaper or something. So, I think I was like 14 or 15 or something, and I found online. This is before drop shipping and like internet with like how easy it is to find stuff there. So I remember Googling for like a while, and I came across like a Chinese website that would sell these Zippo lighters that were like knockoffs, and it took me a while to find it, but once I did find it, the deal was like something like insane. It was like $100 and you get 500 of them like shipped to your door or whatever. So I did that, and then and it shows up at the door. My parents were like, "What are you doing?" Just blown away. And I ended up selling all of them at our school for $20 a piece.
Wow.
And I got in trouble with my with the vice principal there, because he caught me filling up some of the lighters with lighter fluid in the locker for them, and obviously having like a big thing of lighter fluid at school is not safe. So
Yeah.
but that was kind of like the early signs, of like, my parents started seeing like, wow, like, like just doing some of these little experiments, these little business experiments. Yeah.
And it's not like your parents were entrepreneurs.
No,
No.
nobody in my family is an entrepreneur. No one does sales. No one has ever talked about success. You know what I mean? Like none of that. It was always kind of, my dad was a really great model for like, showing up at work, having really good morals and stuff, but we didn't grow up talking about money or anything like that.
So after kind of your high school years, what was kind of your next step, and what was kind of your thinking after high school?
So during high school, like the transition to going into kind of like professional life after that, I was kind of faced with a bit of a crossroads, because I mentioned earlier, like the cycling career, that started really taking off, where it started off as just kind of being like a little bit of a hobby. And then the business mind was kind of telling me like, maybe you can turn this into like a business, So I had a buddy, and we created all of these like little boxes and like, obstacles to jump on and jump around. And we ended up doing stunt shows for companies. So we would, reach out to companies and say like, hey, we'll do a stunt show for your grand opening or for like Canada Day or whatever, So by the time that I was like graduating high school, on the weekends I was doing all these stunt shows and not making crazy money. But when you're talking to your friend who's working at Loblaws or whatever, and you're making the same or better money, it was pretty cool feeling like doing that, right? So I started to think to myself like, maybe I could do this for a living, maybe I can turn biking and all this stuff into a living. But at the same time, my mom, she never went to university because her parents were Italian immigrants, and they were kind of like, we don't want to lose you. Like she wanted to go off to Montreal and pursue like her own career, and she never got to be able to do that. So it was really important for her to go to, for me to go to university. So when I was like at that grade 12 mark, and you had to decide like, what do you want to do with your life? And I was doing this biking thing. My mom's like, you can still do all that stuff, whatever, but you have to go to university and you're paying for it. Yeah. And I was like, I was kind of like faced at that moment of being like, okay, I'm going to keep this business thing on the back burner and figure it out, but I'm going to go to university. So that was when I went for university for marketing, which is communications and media.
Just back to the stunt biking for a second. Like, would you have also competed? Would there have been like, because you were pretty proficient in doing those things on I can't remember exactly if they're like a BMX bike or what kind of bike it is, but I've seen some of the pictures where you've done like some really crazy gravity-defying stuff. Were there, but in competitions you would have been part of as well? Would that have been part of it, or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So The competitions was kind of, we were doing those like all the time.
Oh, that's what the stunt shows were. The stunt shows were
No, so
competitions?
so what I realized early on was that the competitions were kind of more for status within the community. So the type of biking is called trials biking, which is
Yeah.
kind of like parkour but on a bike. And so it would get you good status within the community and maybe some sponsorships and stuff. But I realized like you can't really make money in that.
Right.
So the stunt shows was kind of a way to like actually make the money, and then the competitions was kind of to be like, oh yeah, like I came first.
Gotcha.
you
Okay.
know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. So then, so what did you decide to take at university?
Yeah,
And
so
what
I-
kind of experience was that for you?
Yeah, so I took communications and media. Kind of just decided on a whim, just because my mom was kind of like, "You need to go to university." I was like, "I don't really know what I want to do." And my uncle kind of sat down with me and he was like, "What do you like doing?" I was like, "I mean, I make lots of biking videos. Like I would put them on YouTube. I had a blog that I would like always blog and stuff, and like post pictures of biking on social media." I was like, "I really like marketing, like it's fun." And I had the experience of that with the biking business. We would email people and kind of like a little bit of sales involved there, right? You have to pitch them like this much money, blah blah blah. So had a little bit of experience there, and so I was like, I'm gonna go do marketing, but I didn't have like the math skills or anything like that, so that's why communications was good for that. So I ended up getting into university for that. And my first year of university, I was like doing really badly. Like I think my average was like a 60, which is like a C plus or something like that. And mostly it was because I was interested in marketing, but in your first year, like we weren't really talking about any subjects or anything that I was like super passionate about. And I've got this biking thing kind of on the side, kind of like on the back burner, being like, do I want this? Do I not want this? I don't know. And I would say at this point in time, like I'm pretty far removed from my faith.
Yeah.
Like at that point, like I would never say in my life I was an atheist, but at that point I was kind of like new age, I would say. I would say like, yeah, I believe in a God, but I believe that like everything is source, and we're all kind of God, all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And so in my first year of university, I had a lot of different things going on, kind of thinking about, could I be a business person? Should I do this university thing? And then kind of like putting God on the back burner a little bit too, and just being like, I think this is good for now. What I believe in works for my current lifestyle.
Yeah. So then when after, or maybe it was while you were in university, but at what point then was kind of the beginning of sort of the kind of the business that you're in now? When did that kind of start in your history?
Yeah. So I started doing like a lot more experiments with like business stuff. I did a couple different businesses. I was like buying and selling used bicycles online, eBay, and I was doing a couple different things. But really the moment for me that was kind of like a paradigm shift moment was I went on a mountain biking trip with my dad, and he introduced me to a family friend that he had. His name was Steve. And Steve kind of was like, those moments in life where you see something and it kind of is like a complete shift in like perspective. That was kind of the moment for me where I met Steve and I was talking to him and I was like, wow, this guy thinks really differently. He carries himself differently. Everything was kind of different. And I never really had like a true model of like business success in my life. I heard about people who were successful in business, but I never met someone. So Steve was kind of the first person that I met that was that. And I remember just asking him point blank, like, what do you do? What do you do, man? And he's like, oh, I'm a marketing consultant. Like I do consulting for businesses and we help them grow and we do marketing campaigns and blah, blah, blah. I was like, wow, that sounds like the coolest thing ever. Like, and I was kind of at a point in my life where I was a little bit lost. I had like kind of the schooling thing and like didn't really know what I wanted to do with business. So here I was sitting, beside someone who had kind of like everything that I wanted. So I was like, can I work for you, man? Can I just, can I work for you? He's like, oh, like maybe. I mean, what do you do? I was like, well, I'm going to school for marketing. I have a couple of these little businesses and blah, blah. I'll work for you for free. I just want to be around you. And he was like, okay, cool. So then that kind of started us working together, and just kind of like, learning real entrepreneurship from there.
And then when in the process did you kind of, tell me about going out on your own and that sort of, that kind of big sort of step of kind of launching out on your own.
Yeah. So that was kind of like that was quite a moment. So I worked with Steve for about a year and learned a lot. He basically was like, hey, check out this course, do this. And I was doing some work for him too. He was developing some websites, so I would write some copy for the website or do this. I was kind of a jack of all trades. Had some like good successes, but also had a lot of failures and like learned a lot. And then basically it came to the point where, I wanted kind of more. Like I was doing like a little bit of stuff here and there, and Steve started going off on pursuing another project that he wanted to do. And so it kind of came to the point where he was like, "Hey man, like I don't really have anything else for you here. Like I'm gonna go off and do this thing. You've been working me for a little bit. Like you should really go off and do your own agency." And so I kind of like took it on myself to have like this mandate. I was living at home at the time as well, and I managed to pay off my student debt because I was living at home. I had really low expenses, and so I was just had like the other businesses going that would like pay that off. So I was living at home. Steve kind of gave me this like indirect mandate of like, hey man, you should go off and start your own thing. I'm kind of off doing my own thing. And then, I didn't have any debt anymore. So I was like, now's a good time to start a business if I were to start one. Yeah. So that was kind of the moment.
What was the kind of the first step? Like, tell us about those. Tell us about those early days trying to get the business off the ground.
Yeah. So the hardest part about starting a business is that you kind of feel like a little bit of a BSer because if you don't have a lot of results and you're pretty young and you're like going out there and calling up businesses and saying like, hey, I can help you with this thing, but you can't you don't really know, and you're trying to sell yourself, and simultaneously also you're working on yourself because you have all these weird insecurities and you don't really believe in yourself, but you kind of do. So the first year in business on my own was like the hardest year of my entire life. I had a girlfriend at the time, and she kind of saw me going through this transition, and I honestly feel bad for her because I wasn't really able to give her the attention that she deserved because my mind was so screwed up trying to deal with everything that was going on, the stress. I didn't have any money to be able to take her out, so she eventually broke up with me. And then with the business, like it just wasn't really taking off as fast as I thought. I was doing like 30 cold calls a day, everybody saying no to me. I came to the point where I would borrow my mom's van and drive down, there's a road, it's called Colonnade Road, where there's a lot of like industrial type businesses. And I would park the van like around the corner and literally just walk into businesses and be like, hey, do you need help with marketing? And every day was kind of just like pushing myself out there. And when you do that long enough, something starts to give a little bit, right? Like when you're constantly under stress and you're constantly kind of fighting and pushing yourself, you develop coping mechanisms to deal with that stress, right? And so for me, my coping mechanism started to become like partying. So I had friends from high school, that were still really into that scene. So during the weekday, Monday to Friday, I'm putting myself out there and, trying to put this image of like super successful, business is going to take off. But then on the weekends, I have this other kind of flip side where I'm like going out partying, trying to numb the pain, drinking way too much. And so that was kind of like, where I was in my first year.
And where in there was a kind of a turning point to kind of help you kind of get re-engaged with your faith? Or I know at some point faith kind of helped yourself personally, but seemed to also be connected to this business venture.
Yeah. So the turning point was that at this point in time in the first year, I was getting deeper and deeper into the new age stuff. I was really searching at this point because there's the stress of the business and everything. I just started asking myself, like, there needs to be more. So I was going really deep. I was reading, all sorts of books. I was reading about like Hinduism, and I was reading about Buddhism, pretty much reading about everything except for Christianity, because I was like, there's no way that my parents are right and I'm wrong. So I was researching all this different stuff. I was, looking back now, like just hungry for spirituality, And it came to the point where I started having like daily anxiety attacks. And I remember one day in particular, um, I was in my bedroom and I had to do like those 30 cold calls. And I remember like I actually physically was not able to do it. And I just like laid down on the floor in my bedroom and I was just looking at the ceiling and I was like, I actually like kind of like screwed up my life because all of my friends went off to college and they got into like really high paying jobs very quickly. You know what I mean? Like 80 grand, more like blue collar jobs or whatever, stuff where you go in, you get your college degree and like you're in the working world, right?
Yeah.
So I had friends that like, were buying cars, a brand new condo, like, had the girl and the contrast is me living at my parents' house with like $200 in my bank account, no clients, not really a successful business at all, trying to pretend like I'm successful on the weekends when I'm hanging out with them, but like not really having that. And I remember just being kind of like on the ground and it was kind of just all hitting me of just being like I screwed my life up. And I actually can't continue doing this. Like something has to change here because like I don't have any gas left in the tank anymore. At that time, my sister at her work, was one of her like close friends that she made at work started inviting her to come to church again. And I remember like in the background, my sister was like kind of telling me a little bit about church and, oh, I'm going back to church and blah, blah, blah. I was like, that's good for you. And then,
Good for you.
yeah. And then that day when I was having like that tough day, my sister sent me a message and she said, hey, I was just wondering, do you want to come to church this weekend? Like I'm starting to go again. There's this really cool church that like, it's really different than like what we used to do as kids. It was an evangelical church. And she's like, I'm going there on the weekends. I think it would be cool if you came. And I thought about it. And because I was into all the new age stuff, I was like, at the very least, people there are probably going to be happy. They're singing. Like it's a good vibe. It was kind of like what I told myself. And I was like, I'm just going to go. And so I went. And yeah, and I would love to say that, I went to church that day and like it all hit me, the Lord hit me and I just had this huge conversion and I felt, but it started really small for me. So I went that first time, that weekend there, and I figured to myself, like, if I'm going to go to this, I want to go like in the front seats and I want to really experience what does it feel like to be Christian. Because it's been so many years since I did that, So they were doing some worship, praise and worship, like songs and stuff. So I went in the front row seats with my sister and we were singing. And I just looked around and I was like, this is really nice. I actually really like this. And on that day, actually, like the first time that I did go, I started crying. And I didn't want like anyone to see, so I started crying like a little bit and I was like, wow, what's happening? And looking back now, I realized that it was the Spirit that was just like hitting me, but I didn't realize it at the time. And so, it's not like I had like a massive conversion that day, but that kind of started everything.
I think that's really relatable to a lot of people. Like, I've heard, many stories of faith renewal, and there are many people where it's been this incremental process, and I think most people like kind of feel badly that, well, yeah, my faith journey wasn't a lightning bolt, and yet that sort of incremental making your way back is like super common and super relatable. So, at what point did that kind of maybe start to spill over to the fruit of your business, or what impact outside of the worship time did it start to have on your life in general?
Well, I don't understand how people do business without having a faith. Like, I actually don't understand that because you're constantly challenged every single day with just like, this is going wrong, that's going wrong, this is wrong. Like, and so as I got more into my faith, it's like a healing of yourself as well, because I had a lot of trauma and like pain and just insecurities and anxieties. And God like has healed a lot of that and is continuing to heal a lot of that. But what I did notice is that Christianity is honestly like the ultimate self-help program as well. Like I started to realize that in the process of sanctification, like I was becoming a happier, healthier, better human being, and people around me were starting to notice that as well. And it allowed me to step into a little bit more of like comfort in who I am. And I think that in business, when you're coming across as trying to constantly posture yourself of like, this is who I want you to see, people can sense the inauthentic aspect of that. They can sense like that you're being inauthentic with them. So when I became Christian and started getting into my faith deeper, I think that God gave me that kind of like deep level of confidence in yourself that you are actually really comfortable in who you are. And people can start to sense that genuine aspect. And that was like the first thing I started to notice, was that it became a lot easier because I didn't have to actually like try to be this person anymore. I was like just naturally attracting people and clients and employees and people to me who are like, wow, like something's happening here, you know?
So yeah, so what I kind of hear you saying is that, which you've really explained really brilliantly. It's like, it sounds like the more you kind of got into the supernatural, the more you became sort of authentically natural. Like the
Yeah,
natural part kind of came back as the supernatural had more of a priority. You just became the more regular and true you.
yeah,
Would that be like an accurate way of putting it?
yeah, exactly, yeah. And you're slowly starting to rid yourself of, we can like talk about sin and stuff, but I slowly started to like rid myself of the things that were latching onto me, that were like holding me back from doing the things that I wanted to do as well, you know? And I think that people who see that and they feel that, that you're genuine with them and that you actually genuinely care about them, because if you don't have God in your life, it's really hard to actually feel like that deep sense of love and be able to transfer that. Like you can't really transfer to somebody what you're not experiencing yourself. So if you're really living something, then you can transfer it to them and then they can feel that
Yeah.
too. So that's what I started really noticing. And so the people that work with me today, that like our team, like that I'm really lucky to have, it's like I look around at them and I realize like I've attracted them into my life because of who I am, because God has helped me to step into
Yeah.
being this type of person, right? So it's like you can't lead a team and be successful and do all these things if people don't want to be around you.
Yeah. Like what you're describing is really, what you're talking about is really just like living the fullness of your identity as a
Yes.
son.
Yeah.
You not only, sounds like you not only knew sort of supernaturally that you're a son, but you actually felt like you were a son and just operating in the confidence that would come from being a son of the Father. Would that be an accurate way of describing your experience?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I think too the main problem that I started to realize with new age stuff was that it's all about like going inward, like look deeper inward of yourself and kind of like it's after a while I started to feel very like it feels very selfish because you're so focused on yourself and like your own energy and all this stuff
Yes.
that like you're not there's no accountability outside of yourself and what you want. Like I started to just realize nothing about this really holds me accountable to actually being better and holding me to a higher standard.
Yeah.
And then I started looking at Jesus and like looking at the way that he lived his life, and I was like, that's a crazy standard. So I just started like looking at Jesus and trying and looking at myself and being like, okay, like if I can look at Jesus and just start to use that as a model, then that's kind of where I can go towards, and that's the new standard. Whereas like I didn't really have a standard before. I was kind of like, well, this just works for like my current self.
It's very, very strong, Matt. Anything else, like with respect to how your faith life helped guide you, or some of the values of your Christian faith kind of helped you in any kind of the practical aspects of your business, things that's like good old biblical wisdom, or just kind of, biblical common sense that's kind of driven you in the challenging decisions and things you have to do in your business? Anything like that kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the number one thing that has helped in our business is that anytime that I'm talking to a client, because we talk to a lot of different people and we work with contractors who, there's like a wide array of people in that kind of space. You know, one moment you're on the phone with a guy in like Louisiana who, you know, is struggling to even just pay his bills, and he's trying to start this like little painting company. And then you're on the phone with a guy that is running, you know, a multi-million-dollar company, and he's got, you know, dozens of employees, and he feels the stress of all of that, and he's challenged with all sorts of fears, and, you know, so there's like a big range of it. But what I've realized is that a lot of these business owners that I'm talking to, they all are struggling with their own brokenness. And a lot of the time, they don't have someone who genuinely cares on the phone, just learning about their business and their life and what they want to do and talking about their goals. Like, I get people sometimes on the phone open up to me because nobody ever gives them that space. And they open up about, you know what, man, like right now, like I'm actually going through a really tough time because, you know, my wife is like going to leave me or whatever. And I think that normal business, you know, like people who aren't Christian, in those moments in time, they're kind of just looking a lot of just kind of like, okay, like I'm kind of wasting my time on this call or whatever. This guy's not going to buy. Like I'm just going to wish this guy well and kind of. But I've had moments on calls where, you know, I'll be like, hey man, like, you know, business aside, like it sounds like you're really going through like a tough time. Like, would you mind if I just like pray for you? And I'm not saying that I do that every time, but I
Sure.
have done it where it felt really right to do. And, you know, do like a quick prayer for that person and, you know, hang up the phone, whatever, like don't really think much of it. And it always will come back to you in some different way. You know, I've had experiences where I've done right by someone and give them good advice, and then, you know, they're going for a tough time, and I'll just say, you know what, man, like, let's not talk about business. Like, it sounds like you kind of just need some good life advice right now, and, you know, like, I'll pray for you. And I'm not saying that I do it with like the intention of be like, oh, I'm going to get something back from this, but I have seen a lot of the times that, you know, they'll talk to someone, oh, this guy's like a great guy, and then it comes back to you in some way in business, or like now you just, you know, that person I've seen where I've prayed for them and then they got activated into their faith, and now I see them posting all over social media being like, you know,
Wow.
God has you, blah, blah. So it's been really cool for that.
I mean, I love it, Matt. I love the fact that, I mean, I know we're absolutely all called to evangelize and to present the gospel as those situations arise. I love your story because, you know, as a consultant, you know, you're in the place of helping people. I have a friend, and she's a management consultant to a lot of CEOs, and she technically gets hired to kind of give strategy, but what happens most of the time is that she ends up becoming their main confidant because they don't have anyone else in the business that they can talk to. So, similar in your situation, you're in a situation where you're just being a loving person. You're not, not okay. I'm going to evangelize this person, but that act of loving them leads to praying with them, and then with the spiritual fruit coming. That's very, very exciting. Tell me about, so you have a team of people. You're working with your team. You know, how do you balance? You know, you've got, obviously as an entrepreneur, you need to be profit driven.
Yeah.
You need to be sales driven. Your people need to perform.
Yeah.
They need to be productive, and balancing that against your Christian values. How do you find navigating that?
Yeah.
Being a businessman and trying to stay true to biblical values, to
Yeah.
being a follower of Jesus.
Yeah. It's not easy for sure. And like I'll preface by saying, like, you know, I have bad days for sure. And then like I have days where I'm better at it. Most people in our company are Catholic, which makes it a lot easier. So like that's kind of like a little bit of a thing. And we try and really, our company values, like they're all in line with that, you know, so that's like something that makes it a lot easier. Some of the challenges is that, like, you're right, when you're in a business and you're trying to grow like we are, your focus is like a lot on like, how can we grow revenue, money? Like you're thinking like, how can I get more money? The way that I like to think about it though is that I look at money as just like, this is a tool that we need to be able to grow our team so that we can propel ourselves where we want to go. I've never really been like a very money-driven person for just the sake of money. So the way that I look at it is like we need money, and we should be like wanting that in our business to be able to grow our business so that we can make a bigger impact in our company. We had, and like hiring, in terms of hiring, what we look for when we're hiring is Catholic values. So for example, I've made this mistake before and I've learned from it, is that, we hired one gentleman where I was hiring just strictly based off of the skill set that he had. And I was like, oh, this looks really good. But what I realized I made a mistake was that he didn't have the values that our company had. And I realized that, like he was actually kind of like into some pretty dark stuff that did not align with Catholic values. And so we had to let him go. And that was a big realization for me that, I realized like we can hire people who have all the right skills and look good on paper. But if they don't align with the Catholic values that we have, then it's not going to work out anyway. So when we're running our company with our clients and with our team, everything we try to align with is like those types of values, We try and be honest with each other. We're not like gonna, rag on each other, but we do want to be like straightforward and honest with each other. Hey man, like, what's going on with this? Like, and those are tough, obviously. If someone's like underperforming or if something's happening or like a problem, lucky that we don't have that much. Like everyone in our company is really motivated to making what we want happen, but maybe in the future it will be more of a thing.
No, it's so cool because I mean, even in the business literature, and even in some of the big major influencers like Simon Sinek or whatever, they'll talk about, when you're hiring people and you're looking at, competency versus values. If you had someone who was highly competent but low on the value
Yeah.
matching,
Yeah.
you would say it's better to have high value matching and lower competency. Obviously, you have a minimum baseline.
Yeah.
But all that to say is that the way you're running your business from a biblical perspective not only makes good kingdom sense, but it really makes good business sense. No, that's
Yeah.
so Matt, like you run like a cool, intense business. How do you stay strong as a Christian man? What are some of the things that you do to sort of stay kind of on track with the Lord? And you've got a busy life because you've got a business and you're active with sports and all kinds of things. How do you kind of keep it all together following the Lord?
Yeah, that's very difficult. I would say that the number one thing for me, this is just for me and my faith, but I personally find that I need to have time with God in the calendar. Like, if it's up to me to just be like, oh, I'm just gonna pray like in the evenings or whatever, if it's kind of like up in the air, it just doesn't happen. And so that's really important because that grounds me in everything else, like all the temptations and everything else that every other guy struggles with. So for me, I've just realized like if it's in the calendar and I need to go somewhere. So for me, adoration helps a lot. If I show up and go to adoration, I'm in a place, I can't get distracted. I turn my phone off and I'm there. For me, that really, really helps. I know that for other people, like they need some other stuff, but for me, it's like adoration, need to go to mass, and just carving out the time for like praying the rosary. That's one that like for me has definitely been like something I need to work on more. But I would just say for me, like scheduling in that time specifically. And also something else that I've realized is getting involved in ministry, because I realized that the more that I'm focused on myself and kind of like what I need, the more that I'm tempted to fall into temptations and things like lust and whatever. So the more that I'm giving in like ministry and giving to other people and doing God's work, it takes my like attention away from that, and it puts it towards like godly things.
I love what you said about the prayer time, about you actually schedule God in the calendar. I know one of the early books, in this faith renewal that the church has gone through in the last several years, one of the famous books on having a prayer life was called Appointment with God, and kind of outlining a daily prayer time. But even in the catechism basically says, look, if you're going to have a prayer life, it doesn't just sort of happen randomly. It basically says you need to make time for
Yeah.
God. And so, yeah, the idea of actually putting it in your calendar,
Yeah.
saying, I'm going to go to this place at this time. Yeah, same with the ministry too. I've definitely found that as well. Like, as a single person, it's, when you only have yourself to take care of,
Yeah.
I find for myself, it's very easy to just think about me and think about my stuff,
Yeah.
and then but having ministry keeps you really focused. What would your advice be for a young woman or a young man who's thinking they'd like to start a business, and let's say they're a believer or want to be a believer? What would be kind of your general advice for someone that maybe feels called to start a business? Yeah, what would be some of the things that, from what you've learned, you'd advise a young person today?
Yeah. Number one, I would say, is like get a really good mentor. Like find someone who knows what they're doing, whether you have to pay for them to mentor you or, ideally them help you out for free. Maybe you have to take them out for like lunch every now and then. Number one, you need a mentor. You need to find someone that you can learn from. It's like spirituality, right? Like we look at Jesus, we learn from him. In business, you need to find someone who knows what they're doing so that you can, figure that out. Number two, I would say, is in your first year, don't really think about making money. Like in your first year, what you should be focused on is finding a problem that people have and just really figuring out, like, how can I be of service and value to that problem? Like just really having the genuine desire of like, okay, so like, what is your problem that you need? Okay, I'm gonna help you fix that. And don't even think about money, because that will naturally just happen. Like people will start to be like, wow, like this is so helpful. Like, like, can I pay you something? Like you don't even have to think, because in the beginning I was so focused on, I need to do like come up with the money and stuff. But what I realized really quickly is that people will just feel like, wow, this guy really wants to help, and you're just gonna figure that out anyway. So just having a servant's heart of really being like, I want to help you, man. How can we make this happen? And because then you're going to get all the results too. You're going to figure, or the testimonials, whatever business you're in, the great reviews, and then you can take all that and people are going to see that and be like, wow, like this is a great business. So it's going to help you. It's going to build a good foundation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Matt, anything else you want to share? Like, we've talked about our upbringing, we've talked about faith, we've talked about business, we've talked about staying strong, flourishing as a single. Anything else that's kind of on your heart today to share with us?
Yeah, I would say the last thing is that one of the biggest things that held me back from going into my faith was that I kind of had a negative connotation of what does it mean to be Catholic. I kind of saw it in a certain light, and I said, oh, that's not for me. Those people are different. Like, I don't really know if I could fit into that group. What I realized is that, like, Jesus is for everybody. And everybody's faith looks a little bit different. How they relate to God is different. How they come to God is different. So for me, it was like just that realization that there is a lot of faith can look very different for a lot of different people, and you can relate to God, and God speaks to us in different ways.
Yeah.
You don't have to look a certain way to be Catholic. There's not a template. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely had that same barrier, like that being a Christian was kind of cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Because when I first started to get renewed in my faith, the people around me, there wasn't anyone I could relate to, like socially. They were all like amazing, wonderful people, but it was like, wow, I might go to a prayer meeting, but I don't know if I'd go and have a beer with anyone here. I didn't feel,
Yeah.
and so that was, yeah, when I realized that there was kind of a Christian version of Chris,
Yeah.
that really helped. So I think that's a really strong message. Now, it's definitely helped. I definitely had seasons where I hung out with people that weren't my type in the Christian circle, and it kind of, in some ways, it kind of helped me sort of pursue the Lord, because it was like, sometimes if it's just social and it's just the people that you connect with, you can be distracted by that. But it was really important to learn that there's a Matt version of the follower of Jesus, and there's a Chris version. So,
Yeah.
Matt, thanks so much for your sharing. God bless.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.